I can describe you in a million ways, but anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So, jokes aside, welcome everybody to our first podcast. Ivan, what did we say we're going to call this? Two old farts on a couch.
Somewhere along that lines, yeah, very much so.
Well, at least as long as you're speaking for yourself, that's fine.
Cool. So, what we want to do in this series is we want to explore the alternative views to management science. And by that I mean what actually does work in practice. What is the pragmatic approach? And what do we feel as two business managers and leaders with collectively, I reckon, close on 70 years worth of experience? What do you think where are things actually going wrong? And to help us in the process is we've got Marianne, labor expert and strong opinion holder of herself, who is going to mediate and officiate this discussion. Okay, how's that?
Sounds good.
Sounds
Cool.
good. Right.
So I think that the topic for today's discussion is why do we have such top-down company structures? Why have we got something like an HR department and a finance department and a health and safety department? Why do we get burdened with legislation when it's line managers' responsibility to actually look at all of those aspects and manage them? And how do you actually do that? What do you think?
That's incredibly broad base there. Look, the starting point is realizing is where is the business's revenue generated? The business revenue is generated on the shop floor. It's not generated in the offices.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what starts to happen as companies grow and they start expanding and adding more and more people to the business, they start saying, well, we need experts in specific fields, which is all well and good. You bring in your financial people, you bring in your HR, and all these different people bring in their professional skills. The tragedy comes in is what starts to happen is they slowly drain away the life of the actual revenue generating portion of the business. And it gets bled away because your accounting field, these people want their administrative controls in place. So that slows down and starts choking. HR bring in their policies and all these elements start to squeeze the business. So now the business is in the drive to produce more. And what tends to happen over time, we start to see that we lose sight of the actual people, the person.
Now,
and it's
I'm
the
hearing a
person
lot
side
of
that
things.
concerns me.
I'm hearing you bleed away the life of the business, which I can't sort of reconcile in my own mind to the increase in overheads. The increase in overheads, I totally agree with you. And I think that living in the fourth industrial revolution, what we should be doing is saying to ourselves, how many of these tasks have been automated? Accounting as a task, okay, is almost completely automated. And you have to ask yourself the question, why have we not re-engineered our finance departments around it? The same can be said for a lot of your other functions, because we've become so prescriptive in the world. Thou shalt not break this rule, instead of this is a good way of doing it. Rules can be automated. Problem.
The tragedy,
but I'm going back to that bleeding bit.
Yeah, the tragedy is the bleeding, because what starts to happen, and we actually come across this quite often, I can't get stock from a supplier because they're doing stock count. That is insanity. But the sale is pushed over and does not happen. You will often hear staff in companies when you're buying, oh, we have to wait for the system, or the system's down, or the whole world comes to an end because the system. And we've moved away from the purpose of our business. Our business, let's get back to our core business. Our core business is doing and offering what was promised in our daily business. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was what happens on the system side. And even on the HR side, you'll find that a lot of managers, a lot of supervisors are very, very hesitant to take action against deviations, for want of a better term, because they're afraid that they're going to tread on a policy, a procedure. And let's be perfectly honest. Throughout in any organization, you're going to find people try and pass the buck upwards. Let the boss take the heat. Let the boss make the decision. And if they can get away with it, they do it.
But don't you think that is exactly where your problem lies? Because the thing is, if your managers are passing the buck up, the question is, are the managers empowered? Do they feel empowered?
The employees also push it up to the manager. They push it up to the supervisor.
But isn't that a company culture?
It's not so much a company culture. It's almost a lifestyle. And if from top management that lifestyle permeates down, you find that people's attitudes towards things change. And one of the biggest things that I've driven very, very strongly is that I want accountability with responsibility. Not, this is your job and I'm going to beat you if you don't deliver, but I'm not going to allow you to make the decisions that are necessary for you to deliver. Okay. And we find a lot of this type of thing happening in the business community. We see very similar type of challenges occurring throughout business. And it doesn't matter which sector we go to, whether we're talking the mining industry, whether we're talking commercial, retail, manufacturing. I've been in all these environments. We see the same thing over and over again. So if people don't have accountability, they don't have the reward of having achieved what they're out for, then the only alternative is pass the buck upwards.
I want to put my favorite on it.
Go for it.
Work from home. Work from home has become a swear word globally because the boss cannot watch the employees work. Although in my experience, when we were in COVID, when South Africa was in a lockdown, my productivity in most of my departments went up. Because the guys automatically became empowered. They set their own times, they set their own outputs, and they became more responsible for their work.
You're going to find they are a minority. One of the things that I found throughout the COVID period, and I went through all the fun and games because we weren't able to shut down for the COVID. We had to trade throughout the period. And very few of the employees had the self-discipline in the home environment to deliver. Mm. And I had a number of them come back after I brought everybody back to work. A number of them came up and said, Ivan, thank you for bringing us back because there were just too many distractions at home. There's just too much. I'll get to doing something, but I didn't.
Mm. Funny enough, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
And now I'm wondering to myself, why? Why is it that some people has to be managed visually, within striking range, so to say, and some people don't? And is there an underlying group? Are there some indicators that can show us these are the people that can work independently and these are the people that can't?
Cornel, there's a funny little thing. I'm going to detract a little bit from your line of thinking here a little bit. One of the things that used to fascinate me in the workplace is somebody would arrive at work late. And the boss would walk up and say, "You're late. Why?" Now, stop and think about this. That employee was aware they were late. Didn't need anybody to tell him. Hmm. Now, throughout the journey to the workplace, they have sat and worked out a plausible explanation for them being late.
A lie. Not an explanation, a lie.
It could well be a lie. It could be a justification.
If they're working it out, it's a justification or a lie, but...
But we can put a brand name on whatever it is,
matter.
But at the end of the day, they're going to come up with this elaborate explanation that has been carefully prepared and practiced rehearsed on the journey in their minds to the boss.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, what's actually been achieved?
Nada.
Nothing. So you've put the person in a precarious position where they possibly had to tell a lie. They would normally not be liars. And you've made people feel uncomfortable, having achieved nothing.
So here's the question. If you're going to take somebody on for being late, and I know this is a big thing in a lot of companies where late coming is one of those things that is addressed in disciplinary processes, etc., etc. But the question is, I understand that in certain environments, shop floors, etc., factory environments, it could be relevant. But for the most part, are the 5 minutes or the half an hour is that relevant? Is it important? Does it impact anything? And that's the question you have to ask before you address it.
I think from my perspective, I've always looked at things as, guys, I don't care if you're late. As far as I'm concerned, what are you going to deliver to me before the close of business
Correct.
today?
Well, that's my line of thinking.
What are you going to deliver?
It's output, not time. And that is the whole thing.
Right. But
where I think people go astray. So, and this is the kind of thing that gives managers, I don't like the word manager, it's a title, but it's not really a role, that gives managers and HR a bad rap, is because these are controls that are put in place, but these are controls that are not relevant to your business.
as I say, these are become of the abstracts, and this is where the bleeding comes in, because you'll see HR policy has been written, starting time is at 8 o'clock and child leave time is 5 o'clock. All
I'll
right.
tell you a funny story. So I was involved in a company where the starting time for all the office staff was 3 minutes past 8. Kid you not, it's written into everybody's employment contract. 3 minutes past 8. And you know what? Nobody knew why.
Yeah, but it's by the same token, one of the things that entertains me. You have a letter of appointment that says starting time is 7:30 in the morning, particularly on for the contractors and people like myself. Although I'm usually at the office by about 6:30. Is that you will say it's 7:30, but wait a minute. At 7:30, they're still playing around their desk, organizing the coffee or the tea. Greeting each other. So nobody's actually started working at 7:30.
No, never.
Okay. Now, again, going back to rules, and this is why I don't like rules. Rules to me are things that are supposed to be broken. That's why we have rules, because we're too busy focused on input and not paying enough attention to delivery. Okay. And when we worry about people starting at 7:30 or 3 minutes past 8, it's almost like a little Gestapo type operation. I'm the boss and I'm going to walk around and make sure that you're at your desk at that time.
Well, you see, this is exactly what speaks to my point of. So the problem is that people.
It's not beneficial.
No, but you're looking into so people look at the principle of there are policies and there are procedures, and if you approach it from the correct point of view and implementation and practice, it's not rules, it's guidelines. It should be guidelines. Policies are guidelines. Policies are not rules. And the moment you turn it into a rule, that is where your HR process will fall flat.
But what happens at supervisory level, it becomes a rule.
Then your problem is not HR and your problem is not your employees. Your problem is your supervisory level. And that's where it needs to be addressed.
So I want to point out here that from 3 different points of view, we all agree on the fact the company needs to produce output, not rules and regulations.
Correct.
All 3 of us say the same thing.
Yes.
And with a slight deviation, we all 3 agree on the fact that the problem lies with line management. not with the workers.
No. The problem lies at top management, because top management has failed in its obligation to identify what it wants from its people. One of the biggest problems that you've got in all businesses, I don't give a toss which business you want to refer to, is that you will find that they have not laid down what they want. And I mean, one of the things that I've done within my own organization is like in job cards. A job card to me has a checklist. And that checklist has got to spell out exactly what I want from that employee.
So a job profile, job description in old terminology.
It's far more detailed than a job description. Job descriptions are very vague.
No, you're thinking of a job description in the old-fashioned way of writing it. There's a specific way to do that, and it's output-based.
Ivan also refers to it as the environment, that every specific task they get from a client, not only is there a task list for the guys in the workshop to do, there's a task list for the sales guy. There's a task list.
But I have a client who works like that, right from where procurement happens, where the job comes in, where the job is then allocated from one department to the next, and they do manufacturing. It goes down a line, and there is a checklist of these guys who are supposed to source the material, these guys who are drawing the plans, these guys who are then handing it over to the material department itself, who has to issue it to these guys who have to start this process. And there's a checklist for the whole thing.
Lovely.
That has to be signed off by each department as it goes through the process.
Correct. But now a checklist in itself is not good enough.
No, of course not.
Okay. Because it goes to communication, becomes your next big crisis, because
Of course.
what tends to happen is you have a decision is made on product, on an activity, whatever, that has influenced the end result. So you're not going to achieve that end result because of this decision. Okay, so now the goalpost has suddenly moved. And it has happened and nobody knows about it. It only gets discovered when the delivery has failed.
Well, let's put a practical example around it. Okay, so we installed a product for a very large South African company. According to a design, it was a very large machine, except for the fact that the client gave us the wrong footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went to install the machine, it didn't fit. Who knew about it? The guys that was installing the machine. So what did they do? Back to the workshop, they modified it, took it back, and they made it fit. That machine failed. Of course, it was out of spec. There was certain mechanical inputs into it which was now out of sync. And the client turned around and gave us a warranty. Who was wrong? It's the client. We were us wrong as the supplier. We did not follow proper procedure. When that thing didn't fit, we didn't do chop, stop, check, do, act.
But again, it goes back to the top management scope of their work originally. And this is where it comes in. When top management fails in its obligation, everything else further down the line
Absolutely.
is just
Okay,
not
so
effect.
what stops management obligation then?
Because it's easier. I'm sorry, we come across this on a regular basis with top management. It's laziness. It's easier to say, I've recruited an HR person, I've recruited a financial person. These are experts. They should have sorted it. I've got an engineer. The engineer should have caught this out. But wait a minute. Who's calling the shots? The engineer or the boss man?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that is where the biggest problem comes in. And I find that within, and we did quite a bit of research on small businesses, because I was looking at Buzzapex assisting a lot of the small businesses. We see what we can do to try and help grow small business, because let's be perfectly candid, in South Africa's instance, we've got a high unemployment rate. And if we can increase the amount of small businesses we've got, they're the most labor intensive. And we could turn things around. So I did a lot of research into the small business sector. I found, generally speaking, they're lazy. The top dog will turn around and say, my wife will do that. My children will do this. Because they don't want to do it. But running a business is not about giving orders and instructions. It's about setting how the organization is going to be structured and how
you
the
see-
information is going to bleed through to all the levels.
But you see, that goes back to what I said earlier about vision, mission, and strategy. And it doesn't have to be a big formal document, but that you have a vision, you have a mission you're working towards, and you have a strategy that helps you get there, right? But the thing is, if those things have to be imprinted on your staff, your top management guys, however your structure works, but everybody right down to the guy standing in the factory and putting a screw has to know why he's doing that. Because if they don't, they just go in there and they do something
but
for
more
the sake
importantly,
of being
yeah,
paid for it.
But more
they don't know why
importantly,
they're
there has
doing
to be accountability, taking with it.
But they will, if they understand why they're doing something, then they are also far more accountable and take responsibility and accountability when they are. So the moment people feel that they know what they are doing and why they are doing and where doing it and where they are going with it, they feel empowered, they feel part of the business, they feel that they play an important part. So an example, when I was in corporate and I worked in the retail industry, one of the things that I regularly said to the low level, and I'm talking minimum wage earners, is that you may think that if you are not there tomorrow, it's not going to make a difference. But it does, because if you're not there, a very important key part of this business does not happen. Whereas if I disappear or the CEO disappears, nobody's even going to notice. And it's the truth. They wouldn't notice.
I don't really agree. I worked for one of the largest chain stores in South Africa at that time was the Greatermans Group. And they had a massive shrinkage problem in Durban. And when I started there, they were sitting with a shrinkage of 3.4% of turnover, which is monstrous. Within 6 months, I had it down to 1.03. And the financial director called me in and he said, Ivan, how has this happened? I said, John, I walk the shop floor. That's the difference.
But we did that all the time.
Your line managers are so busy, tied up in the back with orders, paperwork, procedures, buying, and all the other peripherals, okay, that they don't know what's happening on the shop floor. If you take the cosmetic counters as a classic example, you've got a lot of lovely, pretty ladies handing out cosmetics. They're doing the facials and all the rest of it. And they take such pride in the work they're doing. But now they need a commodity that they've run out of stock of. So they take it from the shelf with the intention of putting it in the book that they've drawn the stock. But that doesn't happen. Because they're pretty and their world's in this fantasy of beauty. But that gets treated as theft. So now an innocent action, which was actually promoting the business, is now turned into something that's hideous.
No, but it's not theft. And anybody who has the right understanding of the process wouldn't treat it as theft.
But this is the reality. And again, I mean,
But that's bad management.
We had a different outlet. We had an issue with produce. Okay, and again, the claim was we're losing this vast amount of produce and it's being stolen and there's crime and it's fraudulent documentation and overstatement of what's been delivered. And I actually went with an MD. I took him downstairs and I showed him where customers have bruised tomatoes and this type of stuff and it's terrible stuff to handle. Now, even though the employees have got gloves, they were guessing the weight of what they were writing off. You see, and again, it goes back to accountability.
But this is not. But let's get back to my point.
We want to fight with the supervisor, and sometimes I wonder if the supervisor should even be there.
They have a role to play. But the point is, if you get back to my point where I was saying, if the person who's packing the shelf is not there, he is more missed than a management member who goes away for a day to go and attend a meeting. Because of the fact that if he's not there, the shelf does not get packed. But the guy doesn't realize his importance in the chain. And that's what I'm trying to get to.
That's the same thing you said. That's where you started off. It says revenue is generated on the shop floor.
It's on the shop floor.
So this is what I'm saying.
Revenue is not generated by management.
No.
Let's be very clear about that.
Well, every time you employ a manager, they're a burden. They're an overhead. They do not generate revenue. Foremen do not generate revenue. Okay. The MDs don't generate revenue. The revenue is generated on the shop floor.
So that is why I'm saying those people need to understand what your vision, mission, and strategy is. They need to understand what their role in your
they must be given the
organization.
tools that go with it.
Absolutely.
Okay. And
I don't disagree
unfortunately,
with that.
you will find that what tends to happen is top management will decree, and decree gets spread out, and people on the shop floor don't have a clear picture of what
And why
they
is that?
have to deliver.
So I think we've identified where your problem
That is why.
lies.
That's why within, and this is why with the Buzzapex, this is why I've done so much and put so much into getting it down to the lowest possible level within the organization.
Well, let's
have
jump.
them know exactly what's going on.
Well, let's jump to the platform that you've developed. Tell us a little bit about that. How does it work? Why does it work that way?
The purpose of Buzzapex is to bring everything into a situation where we look at the actual tasks being asked of people. Let me give you a lovely little sort of story. I've been through this with Cornel once before. You know, we have a situation where we've had a number of companies over the years. You send to go and pick up stock, and your guy arrives there to pick up the stock, and they announce that, oh, you're on stop supply. Why am I on stop supply? No, well, there's an invoice that hasn't been paid. Right. Do I have that invoice? Oh, well, we don't know. Well, if I don't have the invoice, I can't pay it. So can I please have the invoice? I'll pay it with pleasure. Now, this kind of mentality is very destructive, because if you sit down and think about it, the company has invested money in a sales rep going out there to secure business. Now, in order to secure that business, he's got to take that business away from somebody else, because that business is being handled by another entity. So the rep's got to work like a little Trojan to try and steal that business away to bring it across to your own business. They've now invested all this time and money and effort and energy has gone into it, brought this customer on board. Starts trading, starts buying, lovely. One invoice goes missing, gets mislaid for whatever reason. That customer is now put on stop supply. What do you think he does?
Finds another supplier.
He goes straight back to the previous supplier. And the accountant is normally, and again, please bless their souls, the accounting people, but they can be wonderfully stupid sometimes. They're very proud of the fact they put that company on stop supply, because their cash flow has to be managed and they're doing their job, which is perfectly correct. They are doing their job. But they're only seeing the one half of the problem. The other half of the problem is sales has invested a whole lot of money and isn't going to get a return. Okay. So somewhere things got to be changed in the middle. And this is what the platform has been designed for. The product has been designed around getting the information. Because when there's a stop supply, the first thing that happens is the sales rep will go to the boss and say, I can't supply the customer. Now the customer's just crapped all over me. So the boss is going to call a meeting and he's going to call a financial guy in. Now everybody's sitting around the table now discussing this whole thing. Especially if it's a large account that they're likely to lose now because of this silly event. Right? And a lot of people are excited and a lot of people get angry with each other, and you see the frustration in all the faces. And I'm saying this is nuts. Because accounting is going to say, but we gave to sales the report. And sales is going to say, but yes, but what's my job? Selling or reading your reports? Okay. So this is the kind of trap we get into. So what I've done on the platform is I've said, look, guys, you want the sales rep to sell. Well, let the sales rep at the same time have the information that when they receive an order, they can see whether their customer is delinquent in any form before they send the order down to warehouse to pull the stock. Because that's the other one that gets caught in this whole quagmire, because they pull the stock before they go to accounts to ask to raise the invoice.
Yep.
Yeah, Of course.
So now they've got to take the stock and put it back now because it's on stop supply. So we create chaos in our businesses unnecessarily. So if we can just trim out the waste, and this is where a lot of companies do, they bleed their profits away in waste. So the platform's been designed around getting rid of waste. Put the information where it's needed. It's the same thing as the guys on, and one of the things that we found with the service crews, is the service crews would go out and they'd do their job card and get their job card signed off, they close their job card, and the information wasn't getting through to sales. It wasn't getting through to the people who need that information, because the service crew, they're aware of something. So if they've done a repair on the machine or whatever it is that they've done, that information doesn't get back to the people that need it.
Yep.
So you need a system that will automatically take it for them. So we've built that in. And we've done things like this to overcome the loss of information, of communication.
But you've gone one step further, because what you've done is that you find that there's repetitive tasks in anything that the service, and you have put that into a job card. So when a job card and a crew arrives on site, the first thing the crew needs to do is he needs to go through the checklist and says, is the valve there? Is the actuator there? Is the tank there? Is it been inspected? And they need to tick all of these things that we automatically assume. In the industry where I came from, how many times did I find that a crew rocks up at a client to install a machine and nobody knows about it? We don't know where the machine goes. We don't know who's in charge of it. We'll go and find somebody. And they end up going 2 or 3 times. Whereas that checklist should have been done. Has somebody phoned the factory manager and said to him, look, we are installing today?
You can't have people going to
How
a
often does that
site.
happen?
You can't have people going to a site if they don't know who the contact person is. Can't have people going onto site if they don't know what the health and safety requirements are, because that's a major nightmare for most contractors.
Absolutely.
You've got to have all this information, and unfortunately what tends to happen is sales, they've got the order. And as far as they're concerned, I've done my job.
Yeah. Take order, chuck it over the wall, my job's done, thank you
Correct.
guys, off I go.
And then whoever's following up after that, they've now got to go and rediscover what the sales rep should have established from the day one. So we have this enormous amount of waste and reckless business behavior. And I've seen so many companies struggling with these daily things. And let's be perfectly candid, most of what we do in life is repetitive in one form or another. Okay.
And if it's repetitive, you can automate it.
We can set the automation side is not going to be so easy, but we can set the standards, we can set the units of measure so that we know when things are failing. And we're not interested in what is done well. We're only interested in what's done poorly. Okay. If something is, it's very much like employees. An employee is doing a good job, why hassle them? Okay. The only ones you want to hassle are the ones that aren't performing.
Oh, that's another one of my favorites. Is take away from employee that does not perform, overload employee that does perform. And when he or she doesn't perform anymore, you ask yourself, now what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Well, sir, maybe because I was overloaded, because the other bugger sitting over there doesn't do anything anymore because you don't trust them.
Correct. And that is why, again, I'm going back to accountability, because if you've got your units of measure there and you've got your ability to measure the performance of people, all right, it becomes a lot easier because you're allowing the units of measure to be the discipline, not the supervisor, not the manager. We were commenting a little earlier about this he said, she said, because again, you sit in a situation where you get somebody comes storming into your office and says, oh, this has gone wrong. Right. Who was involved? Oh, these people. So you say, okay, fine, let's get them in. Let's find out what's going on. Or we go down to the shop floor and go and talk to them down at the shop floor. I don't care where. And then you get caught in this one claims this, that one claims that. And somehow you have to become an arbiter of who's telling the truth. So it doesn't matter which way you rule, one side is going to be offended. Minimum.
Yeah.
You're going to upset somebody. How is this good for business? I don't want to be offending my staff. These are people that are contributing to my wealth. So why would I want to offend them? It's insane. And again, what I've done now, again, using the same platform, I swing around in my chair and I go into the comments on the job card or the comments on the invoice or the comments on the, and I have a look and see who said what.
Yeah.
And if it isn't there, it wasn't said.
That's the thing.
Okay. And you take away the issues that cause the friction points in your business, because it's all well and good to turn around and say, I've dealt with that he said, she said scenario. My decision is final.
Yeah, because
you walk away.
You become like King Solomon. Yeah, bring my sword. I'm going to chop this baby in half.
There we go. And you walk away. But the animosity stays there on the shop floor. That animosity isn't going to go anywhere. It stays. It's like a bad smell. It kind of sticks around.
Mm.
And that is what you're trying to avoid in business. You don't need to breed points of friction. What you're trying to do is do away with points of friction. You're trying to get people to understand that the workplace, we spend so many hours here, you should enjoy it.
Okay. Let's move on to another topic. I know it's also one of your favorites. Customers. What's a good customer? What's a bad customer? How do you keep your customers honest?
That's a very interesting thing, because what tends to happen with customers is that they want best price, best service, best of everything, for free, if they can.
Yeah.
That's the perfect supplier. The real world doesn't kind of work that way. So one of the things that happens often is you'll find that the customer will shortchange you on information. Now, some we can attribute to being a straight out lie. Others we can attribute to being harmless, a little sort of white fib that kind of gets them past the issue.
And the part's going to be what you said, is managers not being in touch with what is actually going on. They actually just don't know. They've passed that responsibility on to somebody else.
It's just they don't have the information.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've stressed with the reps and in fact throughout the organization is, guys, when you sit down with people and the customer in particular, and he's giving you information, have a routine of questions, a routine that you're going to cover the things that you know historically you've been caught before where they haven't revealed information, like health and safety. You know, health and safety has become such a nightmare in this country. It's gone beyond a joke. Where I mean, as recently as yesterday, one of my crews was put off site because the company, it was a major corporation, actually want more than just the health certificate, in other words, the person fit for work. They actually want to know the details of the medical. Now, we've got privacy laws in this country.
They're not entitled to that.
They're not entitled to
Unfortunately, the crew was put off site because we refused to hand that over. Now, again, I look at this and I say, but wait a minute, people, when we spoke to the client and we contracted to them, did they reveal this kind of information? Did they give us the choice of whether or not to continue to quote them? And did we ask for any, what questions are we asking? And this, unfortunately, is one of the biggest impediments. And you're going to find a lot of contractors throughout the country are facing this nightmare all the time, because there's this, the customer wants the best price. He knows that if he reveals all their requirements, the price is going to be elevated. So they shortchange you on the information, and it's only when you actually come to do the work that you get to learn of these kind of issues. And it very much goes back to the machine not fitting.
I've seen that so often, especially on large mines, is that the crew will rock up at the gate and they'll say, right, guys, now we're reviewing all of your documents. We'll get the safety manager closer. We'll do a safety assessment of all your gear. Then you're going to go for induction, and then you're going to go for on-site medical. And it's 2 days later before the crew actually gets to work.
If you're lucky. On the mines today, you're lucky if you can get through it on 5 days.
Yeah.
You're very lucky. Now, the problem is that when you're actually quoting, these people will actually turn around to you and say, well, no, the health and safety is pretty straightforward. Deliver your safety file and life is good.
Exactly.
They omit to tell you it's going to take you 5 days. Now, the consequences of this is that it's just eroded your profit margins immediately.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I want to make it very clear. I don't have a problem with the fact that we need to keep the crew safe. I don't have a problem with the fact that some of these environments that we work in are very dangerous. I have a problem with the fact, like you say, that it is a huge surprise. And the one thing that I like about Buzzapex is that it gives me the opportunity that when I go to a client, I can ask him, the system prompts me to ask the client very specific questions. What is your health and safety requirements? Is there induction training? And when I start ticking these things, it's going to come up when the guys start doing the quote.
Yes.
And they're going to start asking questions. It's not a big surprise afterwards.
Again, this is why it is so important that the expectation from our employees is well known up front. And it's why I've been such a stickler on getting the daily disciplines dealt with in such a way that nobody can pass the buck. If the rep didn't ask that question, if the rep didn't get the information, I'm aware of it because it's missing. That information is missing there. And if the customer's withheld it, I want the right to be able to turn to the customer and say, no, wait a minute, which is what we're actually doing as a matter of interest. When my staff got turned away, I'm hitting them with standing time because in terms of my documentation, I've built in there. If you security hassle me at the gate or I can't get through, I'm going to bill you because you didn't declare that in the beginning.
But you did ask the question.
Okay, as long as the questions are asked.
Yeah, there's the difference.
And that is why the platform is so critically important, because you've got to have a structure that is complementary to the core business, not the peripherals.
Yep.
Okay. And let's be perfectly honest, your commercial, your HR, your accounting, these are a staff relationship. They're not a line relationship to the business.
Yeah.
They're a staff relationship, which means they're direct overhead. They are essential. I'm not saying they don't have them.
They're cost centers.
Okay.
We know that.
But they drain the business profit, period. Okay. They do not contribute to profitability in any form. I know I've heard HR people say, no, but we do a wonderful job. I don't dispute you do a wonderful job. But it comes at a price.
Funny enough, I've heard the finance people say the same thing.
Oh, yeah, they do the same thing. Yes. But that for me is what's important, is what's happening on the shop floor, because that is your revenue generation. I mean, I've actually got a client, believe this or not, they have every quarter a meeting to discuss the meetings planned for the next quarter.
Multinational.
Oh, it is a multinational.
Of course, I knew it.
Okay. But and I look at this time thing and I think to myself, well, because you're a multinational, you can afford to be squanderous in this sort of form. But for the average business, we can't adopt that line of thinking. It's going to cripple us. So meetings for me are the one thing I never ever want to have. I don't want to have a meeting at any time. And again, on the platform, because of the way in which it's been designed, I can actually log in and I can see what the workload is of each of my people without going to talk to them. And I can see what comments they're putting in. So if I've got a delinquent invoice and there's no comment on that invoice, then I know somebody hasn't made the phone call to the debtor
The customer, yeah.
to ask where's the boodle.
Yeah, yeah.
And I find that is where the power comes in, because I don't need to hassle people. I can do that from behind the scenes. We don't need meetings. We don't need to be wasting time. The cost of labor today labor is not cheap. It's not cheap at all.
Yeah, and it's a hassle, like we've now figured out. Okay. Cool. Okay.